Hello, and welcome to The Word Made Flesh.
This is our weekly review of the upcoming Sunday, the Word of God, and how to incorporate it into our daily lives. Jonathan, last week we pushed pause on Ordinary Time. Had a little bit of a celebration for the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
It's pretty great.
Yeah, it's always nice to celebrate Our Lady.
Yeah.
And this week we go back to where we left off, kind of, sort of. We've been working through the Bread of Life discourse, and we are at now the 21st Sunday in Ordinary Time.
It's excellent.
Where do we start?
Joshua.
Take us back to the Old Testament. Joshua.
Yeah, so Joshua, he's gathering all the leaders.
Who was Joshua?
My son.
No, he was the son of Nun. Joshua, the son of Nun. Not Jonathan's the son of Genevieve. But Jonathan, Joshua, the son of Nun. He was basically Moses' successor. Say that 10 times fast. Moses' successor. He was Moses' successor. That is hard to say. And he led the people into the promised land. And we find him really sticking it to them. Yeah,
because they're kind of living however they want to live, especially the leaders. And he says, you know what? If it does not please you serving our God, choose another God.
Yeah.
And follow them.
No more sitting on the fence.
No more sitting on the
fence. I suppose in this long journey, people get used to kind of doing their own thing, following their own habits. They've been going through foreign nations and picking up notions of false gods and the worship of false gods. And so we find that some of the Israelites are leaving their practice or their exclusive belief in the one God and following after other gods.
Right.
Joshua ain't having any of that.
No. And even in their response, they say, well, no, we're going to follow our God because he's the one that led us to the promised land and provided the manna in the desert.
And Joshua does a good thing because as he puts that challenge out there, he also accepts it for himself. So he says, choose you this day who you will serve, the God of Israel and our fathers or these false gods. As for me and my house, I don't care what you all do, but as for me and my house, we will serve the one true God.
And I think that's something that we can all tend to do, is when we put a challenge out there, we need to be asking ourselves those very same questions many times.
Step up to the plate.
Because it's probably true for us as well.
This goes to that, that gospel that it's easy to find the speck in your brother's eye, while the beam is hanging out of your own eye. That if you're going to point something, call something, whatever, you got to be ready to step up yourself. Yeah. So Joshua, the successor of Moses' successor, he makes them choose you this day. Because it's not like, well, let me sit and think about this. Let me take some time. No. Salvation is on the line. Today, make a decision. So that sets us up for what is to come. We're going to roll through the psalm, Jonathan, because
we've done it.
It's the same psalm that we've had for the last 3-4 weeks, minus last week. Taste and see that the Lord is good, which is pointing us to that Bread of Life discourse coming up at the end.
Right.
But before we get there, we got a doozy for you.
Ephesians.
Chapter 5. Everyone's favorite.
Wives, be subordinate to your husbands.
And of course he went right to that line. We could have focused on any line, but Jonathan wants to just make sure that you all hear, wives, be subordinate to your husbands.
But maybe the next line is...
The previous line. Be subordinate to one another out of deference for Christ.
Yes.
So it's one of those readings where Paul... He's talking about married life. He's talking about the relationship between husbands and wives. And in the society in which they are living at the time, there was a definite patriarchal hierarchy. So the man was the head of the household. And the woman was considered less. Property, in some sense, and so it was a subordinate in that sense. But what Paul is going to do here is he's going to erase that to some degree right away at the beginning, when he says, husbands, wives, Christians, be subordinate to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Right.
That changes the whole meaning. Now we can hear what he has to say individually.
And even then, with the husband, so the next line, what I was going to get towards is he asked husbands to lead, their family as Christ led the church, meaning husbands willing to lay their lives down and give up everything for their family.
Right. It's a beautiful image of marriage. I mean, this is really where the sacrament of marriage is really unfolded in the church, because Paul basically wants to say, if you are a wife, then you have to lay down your life and give yourself completely to your spouse, because you recognize in your husband Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. So bow down before Jesus Christ, recognizing that when you give yourself to your husband in this way, Christ is really present. But then the flip side is true. Husbands, you have got to love your wives to the point of death, to the point of being scourged and crucified and spat upon and rejected and poured out in death. You have to love your wife that way. She is so important that your life is meaningless before hers. That's incredible.
How's that for a challenge?
Yeah. You have to be Jesus Christ to her. Because you recognize who she is to you. So there really is a great, in some sense, an equality that is struck here by St. Paul by calling them to see Christ in the midst of their marriage and to serve that. Right.
So it gets a bad rep, but it really is a beautiful, like you said, that is what marriage should be.
Right.
And so
it is. It is a mystery of the cross and Christ being made present in that relationship. So it's really not something to fear. I'm sure there'll be a lot of elbow pokings and whatever's going on. But what a beautiful understanding when I am going to give myself totally to you. Okay. Speaking of giving myself totally to you,
Jesus has just given. So we missed week 20, ordinary time.
That's because the Assumption of Mary jumped in there.
So we missed Jesus
finishing his discourse.
Finishing his discourse.
Which we got a taste of it the week prior when he says, my flesh, anybody who eats my flesh and drinks my blood will live forever.
Right.
And he will continue now. The week we missed, I think, really talks about that.
Yes.
And then where do we find things this week, Jonathan?
People are murmuring again.
People are murmuring.
It's just not just people. This isn't just the crowds now. It's his disciples.
Exactly. So now it strikes closer to home.
It is closer to home.
So imagine Jesus, his apostles, and the disciples, and then the crowds. Mm-hmm. The disciples are a little uncomfortable now.
Yeah.
Because what Christ is saying about his flesh and blood, about the Eucharist, I think they don't know what to do with that.
No, because the wording even used, I believe and I don't know the direct word, but the take this and eat it, the word translates to gnaw. So really chew on it and saying, this is my flesh. It's like, how are we going to gnaw?
Yeah, that word that we're translating into English to, you must eat my flesh and drink my blood. I believe the Greek word, I think you are correct. It has more of the connotation, like you're gnawing on, you're chewing up.
Right.
You are consuming in a very real, non-symbolic way.
Right. He leaves there's no imagination, there's no loss. It's
right.
Take this and eat it. This is me.
Yeah.
And how am I supposed to eat you, Father?
And I think, not only did they not know what to do with that, but then I think them standing before the crowds, I don't think they want to be associated with that. They don't want to have to explain that. They don't want to have to deal with it. So I think they're kind of between that rock and a hard place. Mm-hmm. Like if we accept this, then we have to turn around and deal with all of these people who believe less than we do. And if we reject this, then we got to reject Christ. So it is the first reading all over again. Mm-hmm. Choose ye this day whom ye will serve. And these people very clearly say, no. Right. There are many disciples that say this saying is too hard, and they turn and walk away.
Right. So these weren't just the regular casual crowd followers.
No.
These were disciples, people that learned under him
yeah.
and chose to follow him because he was a great teacher to them at this point.
That's right. And maybe they certainly witnessed the miracle of the loaves and fishes, yes. the multiplication. They may have witnessed healing on the Sabbath. They may have heard some of these other teachings. But this one really strikes home and says, wow, I don't know if I just can't. So it just shows us that they do not have a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Right.
Because if they had a relationship, even if it was hard, they would say, gosh, that's hard, but I don't know where else to go. Mm-hmm. And so I will stay with you, as Peter will say.
Yes.
And just help me understand. Help me grow. Are we willing to do that? I think that's where we take it into our regular lives then, because there's so many things about our faith and about what Christ has revealed as the truth in God that can be difficult.
For sure.
It can be tough. Are we willing? Do we choose God? Do we commit ourselves to Him? Even the teaching about marriage. I mean, this saying is too hard. I'm going to walk away. Well, okay.
Right.
You have that freedom. But that's not what Christ obviously wants for you.
Right. No, I think that gets down to the heart of Christianity, Catholicism, that it is hard to live day in, day out in all of your decisions as a Catholic.
Yeah. If you're finding yourself where it's too easy, maybe that needs to go back to prayer for some reevaluation. Like, what am I missing? Because the Christian life really is supposed to be sacrificial in nature. And sacrifices for sure can be joyful, but there should be something that is not easy about it. Okay. Even if you're all in. Same thing with marriage. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It is not easy.
No.
There are some days you would rather walk away, but it's better to be, I'm all in, and that changes who we are.
It does.
Okay, well, I think that the question is yours. Choose you this day whom ye will serve. As for me and my Jonathan, we will serve the Lord. Have a good Sunday.